Hello, you're listening to Drawing the Ideal Self podcast, episode 17. And today's episode is going to be about exploring a role. So I got to thinking about this really in relation particularly to coaching, because it's obvious that if you need some coaching, it will probably be provided through work or through an organisation such as for sports coaching. And in that case, people are wanting to develop more skills in a particular kind of role. So that made me think a lot about role. But actually, there are many roles that people can play. So you can have, obviously, roles to do with a job, but you also have roles in relationships. So you might be the brother or the sister or the grandchild or the auntie. Those roles are particular to your own family and to yourself, and your expression of those roles will be related to who you are as a person and the way you do express yourself. You can also have a role of something like the bully or the enemy or the bad guy or the naughty one. Those roles are ascribed to us particularly by other people. We may not connect with them ourselves, but when we've got those roles, we may play out the roles that we've been given and experiment with them. The other kinds of roles that we might have are related to things that we do, either for our own interests, such as our hobbies. So you might have a role as cricketer, or you might be a painter or a gardener. You could also be somebody who is a shopper, who also is a house buyer. So, we know that there are particular constructs around some of these roles which are donated, i.e. given to us by other people, and we have some societal expectations of that. So if you take the role of prisoner, you will have some particular things that people would expect of you, and they will construe you as prisoner, and therefore you have to fulfill that role, otherwise you're going to get into trouble. Sometimes the roles that we have are related to changes in our lives that we may have sought, but still remain uncomfortable changes. So you might decide to move house to a new place and then develop a role in a new community. It doesn't mean that that's going to be comfortable for you. In some cases, it might be very, very difficult. It could be that you have got married, but actually you didn't realise quite what it would be like because it seems to be different from before you were married. So those kind of role struggles get people down sometimes. So what I'm going to do today is play a recording which I've made into a video, which is about how to explore role. So I've done a modification of drawing the ideal self, which is drawing the ideal role. And I'm hoping it'll work for most situations, most people. So you could use it if you're working in a school to look at the role of reader or mathematician or scientist or artist, or you could use it in your own personal development so that you look at your own transitions and things you want to develop. So if you want to become a netballer, you might do some exploration using this first to look at what sort of netball club you should be looking for and what sort of netball you want to play. It will probably be more comfortable when you get there if you've got some idea of what you're looking for. So I'm hoping that this technique is able to be used by people who are using it for their work, but also people who are using it to help themselves in some way. It doesn't mean that you've got to have a major problem in order to help yourself, but that you want to explore something. So I typically use PCP techniques on myself, for myself, and they really help me when I get stuck with something or to work out what my ideas are about something and why something's bothering me. So what you're going to hear in this is the audio part that goes with the video. I'll put the video on my website so you can go and have a look, and it'll also be on YouTube. So there is a Drawing the Ideal Self YouTube channel where these podcasts go. You can look on there and watch the video as well. And I am working on finishing off the written instructions for the technique. They should be up probably within another week or so. We'll just see how that goes. And I'm very grateful to the Educational Psychology Service in Essex because I went to do a session for them, and actually I thought I need to get this into a better format so that people can use it properly and easily. So it's because of them that I've done this, because I realised my instructions weren't good enough. Um, and I'm very grateful to them for having a look at the first draft of the written instructions as well. That's extremely helpful. So definitely a big thank you to them. This is drawing the ideal role, which is a variation on drawing the ideal self, a technique that I designed to explore the sense of self. So this technique explores the sense of self in relation to a role. And that's really important because all of us play various roles in life, and sometimes when those roles are either threatened or very difficult for us, it can have quite a big effect on our levels of distress. Kelly said, "Guilt is the awareness of dislodgement of the self from one's core role structure." So what that means is that there is a sense of self related to role, and if those things are threatened, we're likely to feel very uncomfortable and maybe extremely distressed and unable to function. You can imagine this with situations such as a parent whose child becomes injured in their care. Their sense of themselves as a parent may be at great risk from that experience, and that great risk might lead to depression or feeling suicidal even. It could also lead to great anxiety whenever they're caring for a child. So it's important to explore this, and what I've designed is a technique which is based on drawing the ideal self, but specific to a particular role. The idea of that is that you can explore a role related to either work or hobbies or things that people normally do. So, you could explore the role of gardener, or you could explore the role of brain surgeon. It will work for both of those things. This technique can be used for adults or children. The only requirement is that they're able to work through the technique. So for some young children, they will be able to do that, and for some adults, they may not. So it's going to be entirely down to your individual person that you're working with. It could be used in all kinds of situations. So it may be that you're a counsellor working with somebody who's struggling with the loss of their pet. Well, you could still use drawing the ideal role to explore that change. You could be using it in a coaching situation, so that might be either a sports coaching or a sort of creative arts development coaching, or it could be related to a profession. So you could be using it with a trainee psychologist or a runner. So the idea is that the technique itself is flexible enough to be applied in lots of different situations, and also by lots of different professions. So you might be a coach or a therapist or a counsellor or a teacher. You'd still be able to use this technique. So I've made an example to show how to go through this technique. And it has 3 parts. The first part is the exploring of the non-ideal of whatever role it is. The next part is exploring the role of the ideal. And the final part is a rating scale, which ends up with setting some targets. What I've tried to think about is what might be important to a particular role, and this technique has some domains which are hopefully flexible enough to be useful in most situations. You'll see what they are as we go through it. So the first thing that you need is 3 sheets, ideally of A4 paper, and a black pen. It could be done on an iPad nowadays or something similar. It could also be done with coloured pens if you want to, but I think that it's better in just black and white so that the focus is on the information rather than the drawings. So it involves using a technique which is a collaborative technique. So the therapist or coach or teacher does the writing, and the person who is doing the exploring does the drawings. The drawings really don't need to be works of art, so however poor they are at drawing from their own point of view, that will be fine. So we're going to go through an example of being a writer, and we'll look first at the non-ideal writer, and then the ideal writer, and then a rating scale, which leads to some targets that are self-set. This is step 1. This is drawing the kind of whatever role that person does not want to be like. So in this case, we're going to draw the kind of writer I would not like to be like. And that is written at the top of the page. It's important to write those headlines because you will end up with 2 pictures and it makes it a lot easier to know which is which immediately. The first thing to look at is what that person is like. You invite your client to make a quick sketch in the middle of the page of that sort of person. So this is the kind of writer I would not like to be like. So in this case, the person said, pretends she doesn't need to do it, ignores her own plans for writing, spends more time doing other things. The next thing to explore is their bag. And the bags we have are really important, so they are an extension of who we are, and they reflect who we are. For example, a new parent will have a bag full of things that they didn't need to carry around previously. So in this case, this writer I don't want to be like has a bag that's full of shopping, and it has nothing to do with writing. We can see the picture is emerging that this person probably isn't paying attention to their role as writer as well as they might. The next section is about their audience, and this could be replaced by fans or clients, whoever it is that is going to receive whatever they do in this role. If it's a role of parent, it might say with their children. And this person has said they've got no idea who their audience is or might be. Then it explores with other colleagues or anybody who's related to them in a work setting or a training setting. So if they're a runner, you might do with other runners. In this case, it's with other writers. So the question is, how do they relate to other writers? How do they get on with them? And you can see here they've said doesn't know them and has no community. The next one in this case is professional development. But they might be somebody who is a young person who has training sessions to go to become a great tennis player. Or it could be somebody who needs to practice knitting. It's about the effort that people have to go to either learn or hone their skills. In this case, I've gone for professional development, and this person has said they do no professional development and they have no idea how to improve. And you can see that what's important here is to write down what people say. Don't worry about their grammar. If they express things in an unusual way, that's fine. Just go with what they say. Next, the exploration is about their organisation and admin. And even a child who's a footballer will have to do some kind of organisation and maybe some admin to keep in touch with a coach, for example. So they have to get their kit ready, they have to prepare for a match, they have to get up on time, things like that. So even children will have some kind of sense of something to put in here, although you may need to explain it a bit better, and it could be getting ready rather than organisation and admin. In this case, for the writer, it is organisation and admin. So this person takes ages, and they are disorganised with no lists. Next is their communication. And again, everybody in any kind of role will have to have some kind of communication with other people. So if they are a swimmer, they'll have to talk to the coach, they'll have to talk to the other kids at the session. In this case, the writer doesn't talk too much, not really enough. And I would not explore this because although it's a little bit vague, you can come back to it afterwards. Next is their greatest fear. So in this case, this writer doesn't write and they feel that they might be missing out on the fun of it. So remember, this is the kind of writer this person does not want to be like. It's not them, but it might be them on some days. The next part involves looking at their kind of theories of development and also their anticipations of the future. So for this writer, I would not like to be like, she was never encouraged to write, She didn't try hard to improve, and she didn't see herself as a writer. The future for this person is going to be that they won't be a writer. They'll do something less exciting, and she'll be dissatisfied with herself. Hopefully you can see in this example that the drawing doesn't really matter. The drawing can be used to represent things. They don't need to be works of art, and in fact they're better if they aren't, from the sense of time taken to do them. And that's one of the reasons I wouldn't have any coloured pens or pencils. Now we're going to go through exactly the same process, but this time looking at the ideal writer. So it's the kind of writer I would like to be like. So first of all, again, you ask them to do a quick sketch of that person in the middle of the page. Usually, by the time they're doing this second picture, they've got the hang of the process of the technique, and it goes quite quickly. In this case, the kind of writer I would like to be like is successful, and they do actually write books. They bring some kind of joy to others, and they finish books and other writing. In her bag, she's got some research materials, a phone, and an iPad, because she's always ready to write. So you can ask people to elaborate to say why something is in the bag, that's fine, but make sure that you don't pay too much attention in terms of discussion time at this point. With their audience, this writer that she would like to be like is connected and interested, and with other writers she learns from them and is connected with them. And you can see as you're going through this that connection seems to be very important. But that's something to discuss later. Her professional development involves online courses from masters, reads more, and she finds it exciting. Her organisation and admin is that she keeps to a routine and she stays nearly up to date. In terms of her communication, she meets people face to face, she replies to emails, and she has a friendly style. Her greatest fear is having not enough time to improve. Her history is that she worked hard, she learned a great deal, she experimented, and she decided to persist. Her future is going to be interesting, have new challenges, and satisfying. You can see quite a contrast between the two pictures that have been elaborated. And the next part, which is the rating scale, will put the pictures side by side and then have a look at the movement between the two extremes. So the rating scale is step 3. It starts with just the line, and the first point to put on it is now. So you say to the person, so most of the time, where would you put yourself on this line between the kind of writer you don't want to be like and the kind of writer you would like to be like? And label that now. Then you say, so what would your ideal be? Where do you really want to be on this line? And label that ideal. And then say, okay, do you have to get all the way to your ideal? Or is there a point that you could settle for that would feel okay and feel comfortable for you? That in itself is interesting. So, some people will have to get all the way to their ideal, some people won't. But it's interesting to have people's theories on idealisation. The next part involves looking at different points in time to work out what has helped somebody to move. So in this case, we've got 5 years ago. So put the mark there and then draw an arc to now. Now that shows us movement, and there's no guarantee of which direction movement will go. It may go up or down from now. It might move a long way or it might move a short way. I would usually have a few points in time. So I might have also put in here 1 year ago. If you're working with somebody who's young, it might be helpful to think in school years, because they're quite obvious points in time, or seasons if they're doing something that works in seasons, like being a tennis player or a footballer. If they're a reader, you might want to take every school year, where were you? And what you'll probably find is that some years they were actually ahead of where they are now and they took a dip. That's interesting, and I would explore it in exactly the same way. So what led to you getting a bit worse for a while? In this case, from the 5 years ago to now, the things that led to that change are that this person learned intentionally, they put in effort, they devoted time to it, they listened to podcasts, and they did a course. So the first thing is to look at 3 things that the person could do. So you say, okay, so what are 3 things that you can do to help yourself move from where you are now towards what you'd settle for? So you're not saying go all the way there in one go, you're saying move towards. So this person said they could make a schedule to write and work on it daily. They could be organised with the admin and use lists, and they could devote time and not put it off. The next thing is to think, what are 3 things that other people could do to help that movement? And that's because we live in societies and we will always have people around us who are either noticing or not our development, but might be able to do something to facilitate it. So that would be the case, whatever the role is. So if you were looking at the role of a father, that might be something like that they would be able to finish work earlier. So it needs a discussion with their boss in order to pick the kids up from school once a week. It could be that they say that they want their partner to go out every Saturday morning and leave them with the kids so they can do something with them. It could be that they ask their partner to make sure they go to bed earlier. So you don't know what kind of things are going to come up there, but they can be related to the situation that a person is living in. So in this case, what are 3 things others could do to help you to make that movement in your writing? The first is know about what I need to do so they encourage me. Remind me if I don't keep to the schedule, and celebrate with me. Go out to celebrate. Then what I've done here is ask for a shorter term aim. So where do you want to be by next year? And what you can see is next year, where they've put that marker, it's quite a leap from this year and is getting much closer to their settle for. So something is going to happen over this year that they think could really make them do a big leap. So in this case, the person said, put a plan on the wall, look at it and encourage yourself. So then you've got the 3 pictures in front of you and you've got a really rich source of information. So what this person has emphasised is something about communication and being connected that seems to be very important and comes up in both. Something about effort and paying attention to the writing and making time for it, that seems to be very important. And also something about trying hard. So putting that effort in, maybe to face some difficult tasks, maybe the organisation is difficult. But what you're able to do then is to think with the person about, okay, so can you start doing some of these things? They'll tell you whether they can or they can't, and it might not be a possible task. Maybe they say, well, this is all very well, but I can't do any of those things. I think that's pretty unlikely. I think what's likely, because you've elaborated the things that they could do, is that they are able to think, okay, I can go and get on with it. So what I tend to do is pick up those things that they've thought that they could do or others can do and look at the implications of those. So it may be, as in this case, that they need to make a schedule. Well, do they know how to do that for a start off? What kind of schedule would that be? So I would get them to elaborate that and maybe to think about what goes on their schedule and what doesn't go on the schedule, where they put it, what they're going to do with it, when they're going to look at it. So you're trying to get some detail then. The same thing for the things that other people could do to help them. There are some implications for talking to other people and getting them to help them maybe, or getting them to notice progress. So I would want to talk about that. Can they have a discussion with other people to get them to encourage them? If not, what's going to happen? If yes, do they feel comfortable about the discussion? Do they want to do a quick role play of it, of what they might say? And I would be saying, okay, so if you do these things and you try and get people to encourage your writing, is everyone going to support you? Is there going to be any barriers in your way? Will there be people who don't want you travelling along that kind of route and might not encourage you at all, or might be very uncomfortable with the change? Really, the amount of exploration you'll do at this point is going to be up to you. And your job is to facilitate a really good discussion about this and to help the person to go away knowing what it is they might do. So I would always give the person their pictures. Ideally, I would take a copy of them first, give them the originals to take away. Ideally, I'd put those in something like an envelope or a plastic wallet so they don't get destroyed, because they are pretty important and they may want to keep them and go back to them in 10 years' time. I would also talk to them about what they're going to do with the pictures, particularly for young people, because they may or may not want to share them with other people. And if they leave their session with you with an envelope with something in it and then say, I don't want you to see them, to their parent who's picking them up, that you need to have a discussion about that, about what that will be like. The other thing is to make it clear to them that these are their pictures and it is up to them what they do with them. So if they want to take them home, put them under the bed, that's okay. If they want to stick them on their wall, that's okay too, but you're not expecting anything in particular. What you're looking at is really elaborating the role, getting the detail, setting the targets, and then a discussion with them about how they can move things on, and then they have to go and get on with it. So you would have them check back with you perhaps and look at that, or it could be just a one-off session. If you're using it in supervision of a profession, so I might use it in supervision of a psychologist. So what I would have at the end of it as their supervisor is some idea of things that I could do to help their development and some things that they were going to get on with. So that would be sensible to check those out in future supervision sessions. So I'm not sure what you've made of that. What I'm hoping might happen is people will go away and give it a try. If you can try it on yourself and explore a role that you have, you can get in touch with me if you like and tell me how you found it. That'd be interesting to know. I think if you have a go, what you'd want to do is make sure you've got enough time to do it. And you probably need half an hour at least, uninterrupted. So no children, no dogs, etc. Don't try and do it in a busy environment. Bear in mind with any PCP technique, you're going to very quickly be exploring core constructs. There's no way round that. So hopefully you will feel comfortable enough to do that, particularly if you're doing it for your own benefit. If you're doing it with somebody else, bear that in mind because what they'll be doing is pretty important. Okay, thanks very much and I'll see you again in November.